Hello everybody and welcome back to How to Be a Terrible GM. If you saw my video yesterday, that is a pretty accurate representation of how I tend to prep for my games. I always get in the mind of, I'm gonna do all these really cool things, and then I never actually do them. Since I did a read my cringy notes video, a lot of you are asking to read my good notes. And I wasn't initially going to do this because I don't have any good notes. However, I kind of like the idea of the video, so I thought I might as well just do it and show you guys what notes actually worked when I ran my games and what notes didn't. Let me just set a precedent for everybody. I am an improv DM, meaning that I could sit down with nothing prepared and just go, yeah, let's play. And that's tend to how I kind of run my games anyways. I will know that we're playing D&D in a few days, and I'll go in the shower, I'll drive somewhere, and I'll just come up with the game then in my head and go, yeah, I can run that, and maybe write down a few things. And so a lot of my good notes tend to just be a few sentences that I was like, that's a good idea. And that's about it. I have a lot of documents that are just ideas that I came up with that aren't really anything super interesting or in-depth or all that. I do, however, write down a lot of my world building, which really I don't consider preparing for running a D&D adventure. You can write down as much lore as you want. It's not necessarily going to matter when it comes to the actual fun of the game because the players are there to play a game, not sit there and listen to your lore. If you want players to care about your lore, go write a book. That's way better than just running D&D. In any case, that's just kind of my style on dungeon mastering there. But I do have a few documents where I did attempt to write out everything and prep for every possible thing that can happen, which is a terrible idea. Don't do that. There were some that worked, and there were some that weren't. And we're gonna go through some of them. So in no way are these good notes whatsoever. These are just what worked and what didn't, and they're not necessarily cringy, they're just lessons. Lessons from Jacob Buds from XP to level 3. I should not be giving any advice or any wisdom. I'm a young, dumb YouTuber. That says enough. So here's my D&D folder on Drive. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on here. So my old game that I used to run was Akis, Immortals and Never Warriors, and it was called Akis because that was the name of the world. So I guess we could jump into here. Everything's color-coded. So a while ago I ran a game for some people on Discord about a year or so ago, and I wrote a little adventure because I was D&D deprived and I wanted to play something. So I actually did write this one out, and if you want it, it's over on my Patreon if you want it. It's called Tabaruko. And it was supposed to be this really long, overarching adventure about Japanese folklore and monsters, and I was going to include night hags and onis and all this kind of cool stuff. But the game kind of fell off when we never really continued playing it because I started streaming and all that stuff. But I did finish it, sort of, and I wrote it out a bit. So if I were to point out any of like my best writing in any game that actually worked, this is probably it. Which is why I put it up on my Patreon, because I'm like, hey, I'm actually kind of proud of this. So I made a few NPCs for the ship, and here's another thing I do. I like to write out what they look like, so I can describe to the players, and their voices. So right here I've got eccentric Gandalf. I hope Sharon's like tea. I've got lots to sell. That's just what he sounds like. And then I wrote up the city and the government and the defenses and the commerce and the organizations and the currency. Oh my god, none of this matters. I've learned that when I write up cities, I don't need to write all of this. Though in the DM's guide, it's nice to have in case the players want to know. And if you want to know for yourself, then go ahead and write it out. For me, none of this ever matters. The population never matters. The defense, if it's a city, it's a city. If it's a village, it's a village. If they go into the city, there's a lot of people in it. I'm not going to be like, well, there are exactly 6,000 people in this village. Like, it never really matters. And so, yeah, writing down how many elves are in the city is a little ridiculous. You can't, like, let's say the players go into the city and they're like, I want to find an elf. And I'm going to be like, okay, well, there's 6,000 people and 280 are elves. That means they're kind of rare. if the players want to find an elf, they just make them roll an investigation, they'll find an elf. Like, it's not that hard. It's like, are there elves or are there not elves? There doesn't need to be the exact number of things. And I think I just got really caught up into writing all of this, which just goes into another theory of world building is different than preparing an adventure for Dungeons and Dragons. The exact specifics that go into this city don't really matter. The players are not going to have more fun if you know how many elves there are in your population 6,000 city. 60 archers and 100 veterans. Oh wow, that's so nice to know. You can just make it up is the thing. And unless you're one of these people that can not do improv whatsoever, then you shouldn't be a dungeon master. Dungeon Master is 50, 60, 70, 80, almost 100% improv most of the time because the players can walk into this city and then they'll go, we want to steal from the potion shop. And you're going to be like, oh, I didn't write this down. There's no defenses at the alchemy shop. Oh, no, just make up what would happen. Okay, make a sleight of hand check. Okay, you grab a green bottle. You don't know what the green bottle is, but they don't either. So if they're like, can I roll an Arcana check? And they're like, okay. And then you're like, well, it smells stinky. Like, you're just making this up because you know what the game is supposed to be and how to have fun. And they'll take it seriously. The players will take whatever you say as law, just so long as you say it. So there's no reason to write down all this shit. Something I actually really like to have is a list of NPCs. This is super helpful because coming up with NPCs can be difficult, especially for me. I can't come up with NPCs on the fly very well. I can, but they're like two different people. It's either old man who knows the city very well, or random townsgirl who's just standing there enjoying the street. So having these different kind of people to have ready, if they're like, I'm gonna talk to this random person, or I'm gonna go into this shop and see what the person is, I can kind of role play it out, be like, okay, you're gonna go into the shop, alright, the guy at the front, he's a male human entertainer, copper hair, light blue eyes, fine clothing, silk gloves, and he wants to continue the noble legacy of his father. Okay, so that guy owns the weapons shop, and that can play into some interesting stuff that they could step in and he can just be like, oh, hello, maybe he doesn't care about the shop too much, and he only really cares about his family's nobleness, and then he'll raise enough money to buy a castle, and that's why he's doing everything, so maybe he feels very disinterested. And if the players actually care about that, maybe they'll try to help him and he could be an NPC down the road. Like, there's a lot that can lead into that. So I think having these things written down as possible things the players will actually encounter is helpful. Shops are nice to have written down because sometimes the players really want to indulge in shops. You get like two different types of players sometimes. You have the players who just want to go buy the thing and they just spend their gold and buy the thing. Or the players who are like, I want to step into the shop and I want to talk to the guy and I want to know what kind of race he is. And then I'm going to try to play that up to try to get a better deal from him. And then I'm going to try to trade him this thing. And you're just like, okay, roll persuasion, buddy. Jacob, you're being kind of contradictory. You're saying to write a lot of notes, but also saying not to write a lot of notes. What? See, there's a difference between writing down the population, because the players aren't necessarily going to care about that, or the shop that they're actually going to interact with and have fun with. So I think it's important to prepare your notes for things that the players will encounter, or could possibly encounter. Alright, so if y'all know, I run a game on Arcane Arcade, which is kind of like my second channel, where we play live Dungeons & Dragons games like Curse of Strahd and Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and my own homebrew campaign, Sunder. And in Sunder, I've been doing a lot of world building and writing for it because I think it's super interesting. I made a map for it and all that kind of stuff just because it's fun. And when we initially started the campaign, I had this overarching plot and theme and stuff that I wanted to go through, which I still have now, which can always be really fun. You have world-shaking events and this thing that affects this thing that affects this thing. I love long-running campaigns where consequences from like game 2 will show up in game 35, and that's always a lot of fun. However, there was one game that did not go very well. At least from my perspective as a dungeon master on gauging a few things. A, did the players have fun? B, did they feel like they had the freedom to choose what they wanted to do in the game? And C, was there any sort of resolution or something interesting that happened out of the game that they learned with their players. And this is when they went to the port city of Avernus, which was, for the sake of the plot of my game is all about devils taking over the material plane, and they had a war a long time ago, and a lot of them popped out of this city, and it kind of transformed, and it's now got a large influx of tieflings, and it's called Avernus because they named it after the first layer of hell. And this is when I decided to go, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write something epic and awesome for my players. And here's the problem. You can do that if it's something like a dungeon that's kind of structured where they can go here, here, and here, and here, and here, and they can win at the end. Or not. They could die. See, dungeons have this video game-like structure to them where it's like, we go to the next room, then we can stealth, and then we can fight the next thing, and then we can work together to try to defeat the bad guy. But I was doing city intrigue. Whoa! And this is hard as fuck to write because you have to make a mystery. And mysteries are hard to write. Now, I'm gonna give a little bit of wisdom, insight, advice from my experience of running this before I go over how awful I wrote this. If you're ever going to write a mystery in D&D and you don't know what to do and you're having a hard time coming up with any ideas for it, literally just make shit up, and if the players put together a theory on a murder, just make that the answer. If they're like, obviously, a fireball was fired off here, and the culprit ran away and went to the sewers. You can just be like, yeah, that's what happened. Yay. And you just make that like they figured it out, and then they feel like, wow, we're so smart, we figured it out. And you're just the dungeon master, just like, yes, you did. I don't know what the fuck is going on. That's like poor man's mystery in D&D, but if you want to try to be super Sherlock Holmes about it and make the players figure out a puzzle inside a city about a devil culprit rising from the ground to destroy a city in your region, well, here's how to not do it. Avernus is a large port city once ruled and built by Yorland. Was brought out by the new ministry and vastly improved on the first stop when coming to Sunder. It's a port city that takes in all the trade and they disperse it everywhere, so it's very popular and very large. And I wrote a map for it and everything, and I super fleshed this thing out. And as I'm writing this, I'm like, yes, this is a great idea. This is awesome. And as I'm writing it, I think it's cool. And so I wanted to make factions because I wanted to create this faction war. My idea was to make a city where there was this underground mafia cult of devil worshippers trying to bring to life Tiamat. But there were another cult of devil mafia worshippers that were trying to stop them because they worshipped Zariel, and Zariel doesn't want Tiamat to show up. She wants to be able to be... They want to be able to summon Zariel, so they're kind of fighting each other while the law and the players kind of get mixed up and they have to figure out what happens. That's the basic idea. So I wrote up a bunch of factions. I wrote up the Children of the Pentaflame, the Coastal Ministry, the Seekers of Justice, and these were all the different people, and they had different motivations on what they would do in the course of the game. And I was literally just going to throw the players in here and have them figure it out. So the city's current problem. The summoners saved the city from destruction by allowing Zariel to place a rune in her city. Her magic presence now affects the city as a whole and allows her to travel there when needed. She has yet to travel to Avernus and mostly uses it as a threat. So she wants to keep the people there scared that she could always show up. It's more or less turned into kind of like a myth and like a conspiracy because the government silences people who talk about it because they want their citizens to feel safe. Meanwhile, Zariel just kind of looms there knowing that she could show up whenever she wanted. This in turn affects a city with tieflings, devout cults, and gangs. The Coastal Ministry keeps this under ropes so many aren't scared from the city, but also so they aren't found out by the new ministry. And the new ministry is the big government from way down south that need to... are like, devils are evil and they need to be eradicated. But if they find out that the Coastal Ministry is kind of working with the devils, they would eliminate the government and the people in power would lose all of their seats, and they don't want that. So instead of losing their seats to power, they work with the devils so that they can stay there and make sure they never show up and also silence any citizens from saying anything. So full-on governmental espionage. If the summoning circle were to be removed, it would cause Zariel to send her troops back to the city. So they allow the children and appeasers to worship in secret, kill those who would bring out the truth, and run crime throughout the city to make money. The city needs money to get troops so that they can end the demonic influence. Meanwhile, the children are secretly using the money to fund the summoning of Volmanix, which in my world is Tiamat. It was just Tiamat. The Seekers want to put an end to all of this. Now, this is kind of a morally gray circle of events here that I thought was kind of cool to run for this city. So I wrote up a list of taverns, churches, points of interest, blah, 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 some stores that I wrote up just in case the players wanted to go have some stores. I wrote up this one of the turtle who creates candles from beeswax and a beekeeper and all this kind of stuff, and she created all these little magical things that I thought would be kind of fun if they wanted to buy some things from the store. There's the Misty Step, which was like a magic shop because I know my players like magic. And then I decided to go with the quest, and I'm gonna start them off on the quest to get ready to go. So if I can kind of TLDR this for you guys. Basically, they discover that a man was buried alive because he found out about the cults, and he was buried alive because they're evil sons of bitches, and they want to make sure that there's as much torment as possible to worship Zariel, who's a devil. I wanted to have the players discover this and then be concerned about this happening and try to find out what the devilish cults were doing in the city and if there were any, and try to put a stop to them. And so they would find this buried man, they would try to save him and his wife, and then they would try to go out and look for clues, and I wrote up clues and ways that they could find this devilish cult. It's really long and I'm not going to go through all of it, but that's the basic idea of what's supposed to happen. Here's how it actually went. The party shows up and they're all tired, so they go to sleep in a tavern. Meanwhile, two other characters go off exploring the city, and I'm like, you guys find the funeral. These two characters are the only ones that go about the mission to uncover the ring, and they're kind of the only ones who care. Meanwhile, the rest of the party is like trying to buy magic items, trying to buy shops. And I'm like, oh cool, I wrote up shops and all this kind of stuff, and they're very split. Meanwhile, I'm like trying to be like, there's devil cults here, and the players are like, oh yeah, we should probably deal with that. So I kind of force them into finding the clues, and they go about it, but they split. The party didn't necessarily know where to go, so a few of them go here, and a few of them go here. One of the characters had an idea to try to create a steak cookout, to try to lure people from the cult in, to try to find them, and unfortunately, none of this is working, and they're going about it very poorly. At least that's my perspective. They end up never finding the cult. They interrogate somebody, they free somebody from prison, and half the party gets wanted from the city guard. They end up skipping town and leaving, and I'm sitting there like, oh, well, Tiamat's just gonna show up. And I'm like, well, what was the flaw in what this happened? Why did they fail to understand my quest line? Why didn't they understand that they had to go about all this crap? The problem is that I expected too much of them, and I expected them to care so much about the city when it didn't really care about them. I expected them to be good in a situation that didn't necessarily need them to be good. They saved a man, they didn't need to uncover an entire governmental plot. The other gigantic problem with this is that I created a mystery with clues that led nowhere. The entire mystery led up to them getting captured, which I thought would be a cool moment. And the problem with mysteries when you want to write them in Dungeons & Dragons is that you have to make them easy, you have to make the players understand them, figure them out, and feel awesome for understanding them, and you have to give them clues. You can't create a mystery that doesn't lead to anything. The players followed all the clues only to go, well, now what? Where do we go? And I'm like, and I'm sitting there as a dungeon master like, when they go to sleep, the guards will find them and arrest them. But there's no way for them to accomplish that. So they did their own thing and just left. And I was like, well, dang it, guys. So this is a good example of, wow, I wrote all this really cool stuff, but it didn't matter because the game wasn't very fun because I wasn't focused on the players. I was more focused on my city, the mystery, and the awesome conclusion that the players would have about all this world building I did. So after this experience, I don't really write like this much anymore because I've discovered that it's not very fun for my players. And if I go to my more recent notes, the games that the players have really enjoyed that we've been like, oh, this was so much fun. I had a lot of fun. I feel like our characters did a lot of things. There were a lot of choices that we got to have. Let me just pull up this. This would be more recent, I think. If I go to Season 2, Episode 6. Let's see what this is. Ah, there it is. It's just four small paragraphs about what loosely will happen. This was about a game where they were in like this battle royale arena, like Fortnite, PUBG, Apex Legends style, there was a ring closing in, they had to fight other adventurers, and that's what I wrote for it. The rest of it I just kind of made up, and I put monsters in, and the players had a lot of fun, and I realized that this is where I strive as a dungeon master. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying this is what you need to do as a dungeon master. This is just how I work as a dungeon master. If you really like a huge wall of text that you can use and read and all that kind of stuff, then go for it. It's all about finding your stride and testing things that work and don't. And if they do work, then great. You found what your players enjoy. And if they don't work, then you realize what doesn't work and you should probably not do that anymore. So don't get too caught up in preparation and writing for being a dungeon master or having an epic story, because your epic story means nothing to the characters and what they do in the game and how they feel and what they accomplish and feeling like heroes or villains throughout the campaign. And that's the most important thing. You want a loose idea of how the game will go, because you're the dungeon master and your job is to make sure that they have fun. You too, but again, like I'll say at the beginning, if you want your players to experience lore and something super awesome, just go write a book. Just go write a book and have people read the awesome stories that you write, because Dungeons & Dragons is not about your stories, it's about everybody's stories. This has been Jacob sits here and talks to you about D&D for a long time. Thanks for watching. And you know what, guys? This video was sponsored by Humblewood. Their Kickstarter is still going. There is 3 days left to back the entire project. It is super cool. You guys really need to check it out. There's really awesome art, bird races, there's maps, there's cards, there's lots and lots of cool stuff. They have a bunch of different editions and packs that you can buy out of it. So go check it out, because they sponsored this video and the past like 5 videos on this channel, which is really, really great. So go support their Kickstarter. It's really great to support smaller D&D Kickstarters so that we can get more content in the future. And they've worked really, really, really hard on it. So go check it out. And thanks guys for watching. I will see you next video.